Hi everybody, here it is again, Thursday again. So here we are, Think Differently Thursday, and today I've got with me Leon Evans. Hi Leon.
Hiya Helen, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you.
I love seeing what's behind people in their homes.
Yeah.
Is that it's like a sculpture thing, like a...
Well, yeah, I don't know. It just hangs on the other wall. I'm in the dining room. The other wall's got this really fancy wallpaper, and I had so many comments about the fancy wallpaper. Yeah, you've seen it. So I've swapped sides, and you're the first person to comment on that funky thing behind me. So
I like it. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Now, Leon, I talk to lots of people on Think Differently, and quite often I know them quite well. I think probably of all the people I've spoken to, I probably know you the least. So I am looking forward to chatting to you. But do you want to just give us like a very brief intro to who is Leon Evans?
Sure. Yeah, I will. Yeah, it's great. It's great to connect with you, Helen, and with the church. Yeah, so I'm Leon. I'm from the Black Country, which is in the West Midlands. I'm a local boy, born and bred, really. Haven't moved, kind of around 4 or 5 miles difference, you know, so I'm very, very local. Yeah, married, got 2 kids who are not kids now. They're grown up. My eldest is married, and he had our first grandchild the week after lockdown. So that was interesting, March the 30th. Our other younger son has got very complex learning disability, special needs. He's in residential care. So again, that's been a challenge through this situation as well. But yeah, my wife's a university lecturer. She's on the leadership at the church. I've been at the church for 28 years, which is crazily long. I've been leading for 20 years. So yes, that's a little bit about myself. And I know the Forge very well. Been good friends with Steve for a long time. Was in Salt Mine before I joined the church. So that's kind of how our connection
is.
Brilliant. Duncan and Debbie and loads of the other people. Yeah, so yeah, know you guys very well. So.
Fab. So we'll pick up on lots of that stuff as we chat, perhaps. When I said to my daughter I was going to be talking to Leon Evans, she thought I was going to talk to Lee Evans. She was well impressed.
I can do some of those routines, but you'd have to bleep a lot of the words out, to be honest with you, if we went that true.
Have you ever been mistaken for him? Has anyone ever thought they were going to meet him?
I haven't actually. The funny thing is, because my name's a little unusual with Leon, you know, when I was growing up, nobody was called Leon unless you were from the Black community. So I do remember going to some places and someone saying, "Oh, you're not Black." You know,
right?
Okay. And then the other thing was, when I was a kid, there's a film that came out called Leon the Pig Farmer. So that was the other thing that I remember around my name. But I've never been mistaken for Lee Evans. So
and of course, we've now got Kings of Leon. Have you
Absolutely.
Kings of Leon?
Well, I do have a blog, actually. I do have a website, and it's called The Things of Leon. See what I did there?
Very, very clever.
Yeah. A clever moment there.
Great. So we've picked up that obviously it's not a Suffolk accent. You've told us where you are. And so are your family close by? You said that you've got 2 sons. Is that actually nearby?
Yeah, they are very. Yeah, my son and his wife, they go to the church. They actually live in the next street to us. It's so bizarre because like my father died 11 years ago. My mother died just at the start of lockdown. So her funeral was literally 3 days before lockdown. So that was really difficult. And then our first granddaughter, Tally, was born a week after lockdown. So, you know, that's been a bizarre experience, to be honest.
So you've really experienced some of those things, losing people and new babies being born. I think these things are happening in such different circumstances, aren't they?
Absolutely.
So how was having a new grandchild? Presumably then you couldn't see?
We didn't see her for 3 months, other than on a screen or through the window. And like I say, they live in the next street. You know, we walk past their house every day when I walk to church or we go over the town. We live very close to the town. And literally we looked at her through the window, or they'd open the door and we'd look at her from a distance. It was really hard, actually.
Yeah,
you know,
I can imagine.
But I mean, we've seen her a lot since then, you know, and that's great. But 3 months. So we missed a lot of those kind of early moments. You know, so.
I keep, you know, you hear of people that have had babies and then suddenly you see them and you realise, oh my goodness, and they're not that newborn baby anymore, because in your mind they've just had a baby. I just think as well, I mean, I've got a young nephew and niece, and for various other reasons as well, we've not seen much of them, and certainly haven't touched them when we've seen them. I think it's going to be really interesting to see the knock-on effect for young children, probably over many years, just because this has been a very strange experience for them, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think for a lot of our kids and young people as well, you know, I mean, you hear people talk about, you know, they were born in the war, or they were this, you know, a lot of our kids and young people, they're like a COVID generation, you know, a lot of their formative experiences are going to be through this. I'm just hoping and praying that this is going to build something in them, you know, as a generation, you know, for the future as well, really. And I think God can do that, you know, and that's an exciting thing. But I think the loss, you know, loss of time, loss of people, loss of experiences. For me, I'm quite a huggy person, you know, a tactile person as well. So I found that difficult as well, really, through this season. So
there's weird bits about it as well, aren't there? You and I were talking just before we started the call, weren't we, about how you kind of feel like, because of doing so much communication like this, you sort of feel like you see people that you're not seeing. I feel like I've seen quite a lot of you. I haven't actually seen you for years. It's strange. It's strange.
It is,
And so, of course, we're at the end of this lockdown. What has this been like for you? As in, how have you coped? What have your strategies been for getting through this again?
The second lockdown, you mean?
Yeah.
Just lots of alcohol and cakes, really.
Brilliant.
No, I'm joking. No, I think
spoke to someone the other day, and he said about he'd realised how much weight he'd put on during lockdown, just because of like eating, not exercising.
There's this thing I saw on Facebook about, you know, you're going to come out either a monk, a chunk, a hunk, or a drunk, you know. So I don't know which one of those ones I'm going to come out as. But I think the second one for me was harder than the first one, if I'm honest. I think because I was tired, you know, and because of trying to process some loss and grief and all of that. And I think we've gone for so long without things that, for me anyway, a lot of things that replenish me. You know, being with people, live music, holidays, traveling, you know, all these things that are fillers for your emotional tank and your spiritual tank as well. We haven't had them for 6 months. So then to go into another lockdown, and again, we were chatting earlier on, the first lockdown was exciting. It was a little new. Novelty. It was great weather, you know. This one, the novelty's worn off. The weather's horrible, you know. So it's been tough. It's been tough. And I think in terms of coping strategies, I mean, that, you know, the team at the church have been fantastic, and I think we've dug into other relationships. You know, we both part of Further Faster, a network, and I think networks and relationships have been really important during this season as well. You know, and I think just some new rhythms. You know, I'm trying to slow down a bit. You know, I'm quite a fast person. I'm trying to slow down a bit. I'm making sure I walk a lot. Putting some other rhythms, spiritual rhythms in my life as well. So
I've had to be really careful with myself. I realised that in the first lockdown, I actually read, kind of coincidentally, but I read Elimination of Hurry. And it was such a great book to read at that time, because I could physically put it all into practice. And I loved it. I just loved that kind of different attitude of like just taking time and being slower. And I realised that I've begun to do some things as a consequence of this time that are turning that around again. So I've realised that lots of meetings are quicker because you don't have to travel anywhere. We can do it like this, and it's just done very succinctly. So rather than thinking, oh, that gives me more time, I've then put another meeting in because I could, because there was more space, and I've had to kind of really check myself and like, hang on a minute, stop. So easy to do, I think.
It is. I mean, I'm not advertising this. It just happens to be right by me. But this book called Get Your Life Back by John Eldridge has been absolutely brilliant. In fact, all of our team have worked through this over the last few months. It's similar to Elimination of Hurry, but he talks a lot about the transition moments, how we go from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. and when you read the Gospels, you know, you read it like that's what Jesus did. But what we forget is that in between those moments, there was a 3-day walk to Galilee. Do you know what I mean? Where he was just resting, relaxing, you know, energizing with his friends. And our life is so fast, and there's no rhythm, and there's no break, and there's no replenish and pause. And that's been really helpful for me during this season. So
I was going to ask you about, maybe that book would be a book, you know, if you had to recommend something like a book or something to watch or something to do, what would be your kind of like go-tos? What have been your things?
I totally would recommend that book. It's got like a free app on it, which is called like a 1-minute pause. And a lot of our guys are using that now. And on the app, you can do a 1 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute, or 10-minute pause. And it just is a bit of a reflective, meditative thing where, you know, just occasionally through the day, I try and do it a couple of times a day. I just, you know, discipline myself to stop and to pause and to listen to God and listen to my own heart and my own kind of soul, really. And I mean, we've been sharing it with some of our younger guys, and they say, oh, it's a little bit old person stuff, you know, but actually I don't think it is. I think, well, maybe it's because I'm an old person, I don't know. But
no,
I think,
never say that.
I think the ability to slow down, to listen to myself, to listen to God, you know, I think is really important. So yeah, and I think with the stuff, like, I mean, we've watched loads of box sets through this season, but you know, there's a difference between relief and restoration. You know, and I think Netflix is great. It brings some relief, but it don't bring any restoration. You know, and I think it's like they say there's a difference between self-care and self-medication. Again, you know, takeouts are great, you know, but that can be self-medication rather than self-care. You know, so I think we're trying to balance the relief stuff, you know, the watching Netflix and all that kind of stuff too. And other channels are equally available and applicable as well as Netflix, but with the stuff that feeds your soul, you know. And so for me, reading's really important. Listening to podcasts, listening to music, you know, that kind of stuff. It's been important.
Yeah, sounds really good. You referred earlier to the fact that you've got links with our church, and that would be initially because of being good friends with Steve, who's our senior leader. And you referred back to Salt Mine as well, so you would have known Sarah in Salt Mine days as well. Very briefly. So I think Sarah had just left when I joined, but I did go on a tour with her when she came back as part of the theatre thing, and I remember going on a couple of week tour with her, and she was great. You know, so so they were good days, I guess, were they, looking back on Salt Mine? Just tell us briefly what Salt Mine was. What was it?
Yes, Salt Mine, I mean, it's still going. It's based in Dudley, so just up the road from where I am now, and creative arts organisation. So for me, I'm a musician by background, so I was involved with Salt Mine for just 2.5 years in my 20s. But actually, some of the relationships, so Duncan Banks, Steve, you know, and then as a result of that, meeting Steve Miles, who many of you will know, and then other people, Carl McGregor and others, and they're, you know, they're friends now. So like nearly like 30, it's nearly, I don't know, however many years it is. That's a long time, you know, and still doing life together, still doing leadership together, you know, still learning from each other, supporting each other. I think it's really rich. Actually, and in fact, just after, in between lockdown 1 and 2, 4 of us guys from church, we went out for a meal together, socially distanced meal, as you have to say now, and we realized that we'd known each other since our teens, and that actually together we'd known, like I'd known the 3 of these for a collective 120 years, you know, which makes me sound like Gandalf or something, you know what I mean? Like, but actually it's really rich to have relationships.
Absolutely.
You know,
and I think they're like family, aren't they? Friends that go back so far. I've got friends, you know, a group of 4 of us, and we've known each other since, well, some of us since we started school. And it's just like family, isn't it? I think. Just wonderful. I mean, I love making new friends, and I always think it's been a really good year if I've made a good friend in the year. So, but old friends are priceless, absolutely priceless.
Absolutely.
So obviously you could tell us some stories about Steve then. You could dish some dirt. I'm always trying to find something.
I could do, but I wouldn't be a loyal friend if I did that. But if you private message me, then I would. No, I'm joking. He's great. He is.
So, you know, very similar to Steve, you're leading a church now that is a multi-site church.
Yeah.
Was that always your plan? You know, was that where you were always going? Or perhaps tell us about the journey that you've been on to get to this point now.
Yeah, I'll tell you a really interesting story. Several years ago, we weren't multi-site. It wasn't on our radar. And I was in the States with Steve and with Duncan and with Steve Miles. The four of us were at, a conference at North Point. It's the first time I went to North Point in Atlanta. And then we flew to Chicago, and the three of them were going to a multi-site conference. And I was so not going to do multi-site that I said, I don't want to come. So I went into Chicago downtown on my own for 3 days and just had a great time. And then I met up with the guys. So we were definitely not doing multi-site. We were going down a very different direction. And then in 2015, we had a fire that destroyed our building, our auditorium. So our direction of travel was we were wanting to grow by reaching unchurched people, and we were growing. And we'd run out of space in our building. So our direction of travel was to build a bigger building. And then we had this fire, and it completely stopped us in our tracks, really. And as a result of that, it was like God really adjusted our strategy. So it didn't adjust our mission. Our mission has always been, you know, we have the same mission statement that you guys now, to help people find and follow Jesus. But it was, what's the strategy? And so that's when multi-site came along. And so we planted a church in a village, and then another church in another little kind of villagey town. They asked us to repurpose them. And then we now got a church overseas, and we're just looking at another church as well locally. So the whole multi-site thing for us was really, you know, was literally came off the back of the fire. It was almost like the fire stopped us in our tracks, but out of that came something different. And yeah, I mean, we've loved it. It's the biggest challenge now, if I'm honest, in terms of COVID, and what does that look like for our locations? We just don't know. That's the reality, really. So.
And so what is your church like in a sense? Are you very similar to us? We're very rural Suffolk, and that's not you, but no. Are we similar type churches?
Yeah, I think in some ways, and in other ways not. I mean, we're not a city church, although we're just outside Birmingham. We're 8 miles outside Birmingham, but we're more urban. But we're kind of looking to some of the smaller villages, smaller towns where there isn't, you know, kind of lively contemporary churches, and we're looking to be there, you know, and that's so we're similar in that sense, I think, to you guys, but yeah, more urban, probably more multicultural, you know, in our demographic, etc. So yeah, and in terms of COVID, because it's such a big you know, community of people, we're now the 4th highest infection rate in the country right now. So as we come out of the second lockdown, you know, we'll be in a very high tier going forward. So yeah, so we're a little different from you guys, I think, in the background. But I think our heart is to try and reach into those areas where there isn't a church like us, you know, and try and reach people who don't do church or who used to do church and have given up on it, really.
Yeah. And I assume that just like us, you've had to make massive kind of adaptations and changes, and you've had to like be agile and think quickly and adapt. So for us, you know, we've really pushed our online service, and we were already streaming. So for us, that felt like a natural progression. Lots of midweek content. Is that similar for you? What changes have you made?
Totally, yeah. I mean, we've learned new language and new vocabulary, and it's like, you know, we're talking about analytics and the lower third of the screen and the upper third. Do you know what I mean? And all this kind of stuff, and Zoom.
I'm nodding like I do know what you mean.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. But you do, Helen. I've watched you. You do the upper third really well. But I think and it's to me, one of the really good things about this has been just the way that some of our younger leaders have thrived. Like some of our younger guys and girls have just rocketed during this season, and actually now I'm learning so much from them. you know, because the social media world, you know, the YouTubing world, that's their world. That's not really my world.
Yeah.
So I didn't hardly ever go on YouTube before COVID, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm learning a lot from them, but I think that's a good thing and it's a healthy thing.
Yeah.
You know, and I think they can learn from us as well in terms of some other stuff. So that's been really positive.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I've loved it.
Yeah,
I've loved in a sense, like, if someone had told me that this is what I was going to have to do, I'd be like, I just can't do it. But actually, just because we were thrown into it, and similarly, we've just got lots of young people that for whom this is a language they talk, and they are very quick with changing and pushing it forwards all the time, like, okay, so how do we do that better, and how do we do that better, but have been really kind at just like bringing me on as well. I've been really grateful to them. It's been a fantastic experience.
You do, I don't know about you, you're younger than me, but it's like I have felt like I am a granddad now, but I have felt like that sometimes. When they were trying to get me and one of the other leaders who's my age as well, she leads one of our locations, we were supposed to be doing a Facebook Live in our online community the other week, and neither of us could get it to work properly. And it was one of our young guys was tearing his hair out. Do you know what I mean? It was like his two grandparents trying to get them to do it, but we did it in the end, you know. So, but for me, I've been really impacted by our old people as well. A lot of our old people have really adapted well. They've learned how to do Zoom and YouTube, and you know, I mean, you know, you still see up their nose sometimes.
The ceiling.
That kind of thing. But
I think, again, we were all thrown into it, weren't we?
Absolutely.
And so if people wanted to see their families and speak to people, it was just like, well, this is the way to do it.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of attitude for me, and that spirit of wanting to learn and wanting to grow and not being afraid of change, you know, embracing that, I think that's really, really good.
Really definitely positive. So you are different to us as a church because you have your own building, which we don't. So I guess, you know, and I know you did go back very temporarily, didn't you, before this last lockdown?
We did,
so is the aim, obviously the aim is to get back to meeting together, but will that look the same? Or are there things that, because of this, you've thought that's going to be different?
Could you give me the answer to that question? Because if you could tell me the answer, that would be great.
No, I just asked the questions.
I don't know. And I genuinely don't know. We went back for 5 weeks in October up to the 1st of November, and we did it hybrid. So we had 2 services, very restricted, very small numbers. And we were mostly online, you know. But you know what? I don't regret that. It was a great experience. In fact, the first guy that walked in the room for that first service had never been to our church before. He met Jesus during lockdown number 1, and he was the first person there. And then actually every week there were people in every service who'd never been to our church before. So for us, it was like, hey ho, God's doing something here, and you're seeing it, you know, and that was so important. And then I think for several people who came, even though they couldn't sing, you know, they could still worship. They still saw people. Several of them were people that lived on their own or were married to someone who wasn't a Christian, you know, and so they were doing their faith a little bit on their own as well. And it was a bit of a lifeline. And also we learned how to do it a little bit in that 5 weeks. So even though we're back to online only, I think that was the right decision for us, you know. So I think in terms of going forward, I genuinely don't know. We will go back to in person when we're allowed to do that. What that will look like, how many people will come back, you know, what online will do, I just don't know. I think for us, we're talking about adjustable structures, you know, and we're talking about restructuring for the season that we can see. So we're restructuring for the next season. I said to our staff, here's our structure for the next 2 months. You know, after that, I don't know. So
and that's really different, isn't it? Yeah, we're talking the same, but talking in these sort of smaller chunks rather than talking like a 5-year plan or something. But just actually, maybe we're just going to talk about a third of the year. We're
looking at January to Easter. What could January to Easter look like? And then we'll look from Easter to the summer. And then maybe next summer we'll start looking beyond. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
And I think it's been surprising, hasn't it? I think when we first couldn't meet together, we all wanted to be together. We were all desperate for that community feel, and particularly like sung worship. But I think alongside that now, because this has gone on so long, is people have got quite used to doing church at home and not having to get out the house, not having to hurry kids along. And I think there's that new thing coming as well of actually, people might feel it's quite a big deal to actually come out to church. So there's so many things to consider, aren't there?
There is. I think there's challenges in that, and I know churches are looking at that differently. For us, we're not pronouncing what we're going to do. We feel personally it's too early to do that. I think some of the data that's coming out of America, again, some of that's great, but it's America. It's a different context. I just think some of this is too early. I think for me personally and theologically, I think there is something really powerful about gathering. I think we've seen something powerful about scattering, which is really important. But I think there's something powerful about gathering as well. And I think for me, online isn't necessarily a destination. It's a road, and it's really important. But I think the physical gathering, is whether it's in small groups, bigger, both. I think it's really important. What that will look like, Helen, I just don't know.
No.
It's difficult, isn't it?
It's so difficult. So many factors kind of playing into one thing.
Yeah.
If you kind of reflect on what 2020 has been already, and I think, perhaps without even like your church leadership head on, but what would you say personally you've learned during this time?
What I've learned? Wow, that's a great question. I think I've learned that I like to control more than I wanted to admit. And I think, as a leader, I think you lead, part of it is because you do, and I think there's been so much during this season. I mean, the way I'm wired, I'm a visionary and a strategist, and I'm always planning, and I can't and couldn't in some ways, and that stripped some things out of me. Some things that I think were, strengths, but some things that were, weaknesses, maybe insecurities as well, and what am I when I can't do that, and then I have to rely and trust totally on God, and maybe that's the place where God wants me to be. So I think there's some stuff around that. I think some other things around processing emotions, I mean, I think you guys have done this series. I don't know. We did a North Point series called You're Not the Boss of Me at the start of the year in January, actually, all about emotions. And then, of course, you go into COVID and you realize how much emotions are the boss of us. So for me, processing emotion, grief, loss, anger, frustration, and I think the comparison thing as well. We've all, church leaders, any church leader that says that they don't look at what everyone else is doing is a liar. They definitely do. We all do it. And I think the comparison trap is difficult because it robs you of your joy, and I think that's been in me as well, if I'm honest. So there's some stuff come up in me that hasn't been pretty or pleasant, but I think it's been helpful and important to try and, process that and get to grips with that. So
we've definitely, I'm sure we've all learnt stuff about ourselves during this time, and as you say, not necessarily comfortable or easy things, but really good to kind of have a light shine on ourselves at times, I think.
Absolutely.
You mentioned earlier about as you were describing your church, you said about, I don't know how you worded it actually, did you say a congregation in Albania or part of your church was in Albania?
Yes,
just tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a location now. It comes under us really. So yes, I've been going overseas many years, and I had a long-standing relationship in Bulgaria, and then out of that in Albania as well. And about just a couple of years ago, the church that we were invested in there, we were asked if we would take it on as in oversight leadership of. So we have done that. We're part of Elim, part of the denomination, so it's become part of that as well. And that's been brilliant. But this last 12 months, they had an earthquake this time last year, which was in 2019 was the worst earthquake in the world for loss of life, which nobody knows about because Albania never gets any coverage. But there were more people died in that earthquake in 2019 than in any other earthquake on the planet. And all of the guys that lead the church are nearly all young. So they're mostly in their 20s. And so they had an earthquake, and then they had the pandemic, and then they've had other challenges. So in this last 12 months, they've had loads of challenges, but we help support them financially. We also, you know, like I mean, through the lockdown #1, I Zoom them every week, you know, like a weekly connection with their leaders. Now it's like once a month. But it's been great for us because they've been over here, we've been over there. We send teams out, you know, building a relationship, and just they're part of our family now, and which is great. So
It is really good, isn't it? And I think it's so good for us as churches. I know that we kind of often feel that we benefit as much from our global partnerships as they do, if not more. I think they teach us so much, and so good for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, Leon, it's so good to talk to you and to find out more about you and your church and what you're doing. I'm so grateful for the time that you've given me in chatting this afternoon. Thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
I usually finish with a kind of like, and finally question. And so mine for you is, sometimes they're very deep and meaningful, but this one isn't.
Okay.
So, do you watch Celebrity? I need to ask you that first. Are you a Celebrity fan?
I have done. I'm not watching it currently, but I have watched it in the past. So,
okay. Yeah. I don't know what's gone wrong with the world. You're about the third person I've spoken to that's not watching it.
Really?
It surprises me. Anyway.
There's just three of us. There's just three of us on the planet that are not watching it.
So, if you were stuck in the jungle, or a Welsh castle in this case, what would it be that would make you say, "Get me out of here"? What would be the worst?
Okay, so it wouldn't be anything eating wise, because like last June I was in Tanzania and ate goat's testicles. Okay, so they gave me goat's testicles to eat, which I ate, and I've eaten all kinds of really bad stuff. So I'm fine with the eating. The one thing would be anything to do with heights. I am not good with heights, so I'm such a wimp. My wife loves roller coasters. She jumped out of aeroplanes, parachuting, and I am not that person, I'm afraid. So give me anything to eat and I'm fine. Heights, get me out of here.
So like that one, it was in last year's, I think. Do you remember where to get in, they first of all went to the top of a skyscraper and had to walk out, didn't they? I couldn't even watch it. And it was shaking, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm out.
Terrifying. I'm with you on that. Yeah, definitely.
I'm absolutely out.
Oh, well, it's been really, really lovely to actually properly talk to you rather than see you doing your other stuff.
Great.
Yeah, definitely.
It's great to chat with you. And hey, we really love your church. We love the Forge. I've spoken there many times in the past, you know, when it was MCF as well, and, you know, back in the day. And we really love you guys and what you're doing, and just keep holding on to God and keep believing. You know, this will pass. It definitely will pass. You know, and I'm absolutely certain of that. And we all know that, you know, and the church is still, I think, God's plan, you know, for planet Earth. So we love you guys and we're cheering you on in all that you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Great to see you.
Bless you, Helen. Take care.
Bye.